Well, hello and good evening again to all of you who are joining us live on Facebook, on the Mayor's Office of Public Engagement Facebook page, or if you're here in Zoom webinar with us, we welcome you to this conversation. Now, before we get into the meat of our discussion and even introduce the topic of our discussion, I want to give us a few reminders. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen for just a moment. Here it is. So everybody is going to remain muted in this webinar. You can see the panelists, but you can't see each other. That though is not designed to discourage you from engaging us and participating in the conversation. So you can still use the chat feature and you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen in the menu bar to communicate with us at any point during the webinar. You can send a comment or a question to the panelists or the hosts. We will, of course, break from our conversation to formally invite a dialogue, but anytime during the webinar, you can use those functions to communicate. We have been in patient and flexibility mode for going on 3 years now as we try to have meaningful experiences on technology. So we thank you using technology. So we thank you for your patience and your flexibility here on Zoom. We want you to know that you can use the button that looks like CC, the letters CC together to show captions, closed captions as people are talking, and to transcribe the webinar for you. We want to make sure that you are fully engaged and can access our conversation. So please do use that feature if you need to. We are recording, as you can tell, this webinar for future sharing and viewing. So please be mindful of that. Now, we are almost a month out from midterm elections. We voted on November 8th, and here we sit. Of course, elections are not a panacea. Elections don't fix everything. And that is evident because on November 9th, there was still some conversation. There was still some conflictual views and perspectives available to us in the public. And so we wanted to just convene a conversation about how we navigate and negotiate those differences, how we continue to be in community together, treating each other in humane and just ways, even while we might disagree politically. And so we are delighted to host a conversation with a couple of our commissioners on the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs, and then our friend and colleague Ashek Faglula from Interfaith Philadelphia, the city's organization that specializes in teaching people how to have conversations across religious divides in particular, but really any kind of divides. And so we're happy to have them here with us. I want to just set the stage. I don't know how Thanksgiving goes where you hang out, but Thanksgiving where I hang out is full of conversation and banter about any of the important topics of the day. You got people who aren't normally together around the same table, and we got a lot of catching up to do. And that means politically too. Let's talk about the political hot button issues. And sometimes we don't agree around the table. I mean, I've been told by certain family members, Naomi, you're not allowed to pick what we talk about at the Thanksgiving Day table. Because I want to talk about the difficult stuff. I want to talk about the complicated stuff. And so if you are like me, if your family, if your friend group is like mine, people have a variety of different opinions about the political issues of our time. How do we stay in community with people we have deep disagreements with? That's the topic of today's conversation. We don't propose to have any perfect answers, but we all have experience in trying to navigate difficult conversations and relationships. And so I'm so happy to have here with us our panelists. Let me go back to sharing my screen so that you can see their names on the screen before they introduce themselves. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Let me stop my, well, okay, so it's right here. Sorry about that. Zoom's trying to play tricks on me. Let's see if it works now. What do y'all see? Panelists, give me a thumbs up if you can see your names. Okay, great. I don't know what that was, but so we've got Lucy Duncan, who is the co-chair of the Mayor's Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs, and also the co-founder and principal of Reparation Works. I'll let Lucy say a little bit more about her work in a moment. We have Aziz Natu, who is a member of that the Mayor's Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs, and an interfaith minister and the Muslim Life Coordinator at Ursinus College. And we have Ashek Faslula, who is the director of the Leadership Institute at Interfaith Philadelphia, and is also a colleague of mine over at Villanova University, advising as the Muslim student advisor over at Villanova. I am Reverend Naomi. Did I say that? I am Reverend Naomi Washington Leapart, and I am delighted to serve our city as the director for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs. I'm going to be kind of guiding us through this conversation. I want the panelists to start out by maybe more deeply introducing yourselves and your work. Let's go ahead and start with Lucy.
Thanks, Reverend Naomi. Great to be here. I am, in addition to being the co-chair of the Mayor's Commission, I am a member of Green Street Meeting. I'm a Quaker. And in the Quaker tradition, we laid down the laity. So everyone is intended to be a minister. So I'm a minister in that way among friends. I am co-founder and principal of Reparation Works, which is a consulting firm that I founded with my partner, Rob Pegler. And what we do is we support mostly white majority organizations that are trying to move towards reparations. We do that through racial justice training and other ways. We have a developmental map for moving people through that situation. And some of that is based on the process we went through in Green Street. Green Street has budgeted $500,000 for reparations. And I also am a fellow for the Truth Telling Project, which has the grassroots reparations campaign. The Truth Telling Project is really about surfacing the truth of our history and of the current situation to move towards reparations, which they understand is essential for reconciliation. So that's my work. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Lucy. Aziz, let's go to you.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. My name is Aziz. I do a lot of things. Actually, somebody just asked me. So my day job is in real estate, and I'm deeply invested in interfaith and dialogue circles. And somebody asked me, what should we call you? And I said, the title I really wanted was Lord. So I looked it up and somebody's already taken that. So I said, you know what? I'll get into real estate so at least I can be a landlord, if not the Lord. So anyways, yes, I think I'm a comedian. I call myself the divine comedian. Yeah. Anyway, so I am the chair of a number of initiatives. I'm the chair of the dialogue seat at the Montgomery County Multi-Faith Coalition. I do work at Ursinus College in the Office of Chaplaincy as the Muslim chaplain. I work for a great organization called the Aga Khan Foundation, which does amazing nonprofit work in the developing and developed part of the world, primarily in building schools and hospitals and economic upliftment initiatives. I also am part of the great movement in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Interfaith Peace Walk. I work also with the United Nations, with Amnesty International, with the Dialogue Institute. I teach, I'm a guest teacher at a number of colleges, and also I'm part of a great initiative with the American Jewish Committee, the AJC. I'll pause there, and thank you so much. Lovely to have you all on board today.
Thanks, Aziz. Ashek.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashik Fazlullah. I work with Interfaith Philadelphia, and it's really about developing curriculum, programming, and finding partnerships to do this type of work. So we have partnerships locally with organizations like the University of Pennsylvania. We have them nationally with organizations like Interfaith America. And it's about learning about other traditions, learning how to ask questions across difference, and becoming more comfortable with that, and hopefully becoming a local practitioner of that. So outside of Interfaith Philadelphia, I'm also, as Naomi mentioned, at Villanova as a Muslim student advisor, and also in a similar roles at Bryn Mawr College and Swarthmore College. So thanks for having me this evening.
Thank you. And I look forward to Ashek sharing a timely opportunity for you to go deeper in navigating difficult conversations with Interfaith Philadelphia. So let's get right into it and talk a little bit about where you have seen. Now, the media tells us that everybody is at odds with everybody, right? Where have you seen deep political or maybe social disagreement in your faith communities? Like, what's the nature of that disagreement? Is it always about what the media tells us we're fighting about, or are you saying that and more? I'll start with you, Aziz.
Oh, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, peace be on y'all. So I bring a different perspective to the table. I was born in Africa, I grew up in Africa, so that sensibility of growing up as an African, especially I grew up in Tanzania and Kenya. We were in the process of shaking off the colonial occupation, so there was a lot of leftover influences of the colonial rule. And obviously you can tell I'm of Indian ethnicity. I'm an immigrant, a teacher, a preacher, a justice warrior. So all those different positions and perspectives it's a nuanced perspective that I bring to the table. I would say there are two primary areas that lead to some degree of discord. One is Islam, obviously, y'all know, is like the second largest faith in the world right now. We are 1/4 of humanity. And there is within that, and it is the most cosmopolitan and diverse faith in the world. And so people coming from different parts of the world with different cultures, with different languages, with different lived experience, coming together in this great country. Sometimes there is you're essentially clamoring for wherever you're coming from to be the one that is the primary language of whatever the festival is, or how in which language the sermon is going to be recited. And I also believe that while Islam gives humanity or Muslims a beautiful richness of interpretation of our faith, those and also, by the way, Islam is inclusive of the Judeo-Christian tradition as well, which is both a blessing and sometimes a point of stress, because yes, we believe in the previous revelations, but sometimes in the nuanced conversation, it becomes a source of some degree of tension. But I think what it does is it is maturing our community, the Muslim community in the United States, to become better neighbors, to explain our faith to those who don't know about us. In our experience, the media does not treat us well and does not produce the best image, or at least a just image of who we are as a community. And then so what that happens is that responsibility falls on us, the Muslims, to seek out channels of dialogue, to build bridges, to reach out and explain to those who have been misled about who we are. This is exactly who we are. And we do not want to, we want to emphasize on conversing, not converting. And who knows, the conversion may happen after conversing. But I think the emphasis should be on significant outreach. But many within our communities are not that fluent in doing the outreach. And so that may be one area. The other area is those who come from underdeveloped or developing parts of the world have a harder time integrating, especially due to the absence of established support mechanisms. And therefore, there may be a significant unevenness between those who make up the Muslim community in this country. So cultural items like food, clothing, language of the sermons, as I mentioned, these tend to be both a source of richness, but also a sort of, why is it that, I'm from Africa, why is there, very little literature in Swahili, which is the language I grew up with? So those things will come up, but I have no doubt that we will iron out those differences. And we are a very inclusive community, and I'm sure we will make our presence felt. I'll pause here if that's okay.
Thank you, Aziz. I hear you talking about the internal diversity within the tradition and how sometimes that internal diversity can be a catalyst for deep disagreement, deep conflict. Thank you so much. Lucy, what are you thinking? What are you seeing?
That's exactly the issue with Quakers as well. I mean, the original insight of Quakerism, which was from George Fox in 1642, he had a vision as he stood on Pendle Hill and he rejected what he called professors, which were priests who were saying the word of God, but who were not living it, or the Bible. I mean, the original insight of Quakerism was to revive primitive Christianity, which was following the spirit and life of Christ. And his insight was really like, Christ saith this, and the scriptures say this, and professors say this, but what canst thou say? Is it inwardly from God? And so is this idea of that of God in everyone. And what does that mean? And how do people interpret that theologically? And there's a huge spectrum. And for the political spectrum in Quakerism kind of lines up with how centrally, not entirely, but does pretty much line up with how much people focus on scripture as the elemental truth, and what role they think of scripture, and how literal people take scripture or not. And so the diversity of the theological diversity of Quakers is pretty huge. We have evangelical Quakers, and we have what people generally think of as Quakers, those who worship in silence and understand everyone is a minister and people can speak out of that silence in order to hear the word of God. But the biggest political differences among Friends that are related to this theological difference is one is about homosexuality and LGBTQ rights. And there have been splits in the last 5 to 10 years where yearly meetings have split because around same-sex marriage and around trans rights and around those things. That's been one really big fissure politically. And then the other is colonialism and white supremacy, and how urgent the call is for us to move beyond. So there's my friend Vanessa July wrote a really fabulous book called Fit for Freedom, Not for Friendship, which busts the myths of Quakerism, Quakers all being abolitionists. It took Quakers were slaveholders. Quakers were big slaveholders in Barbados, and it took 100 years for an interpretation of that of God and everyone to mean that that as a community, we said, no, slavery is not consistent with our faith. And so and the book that Vanessa wrote is basically that, that Quakers, even who are abolitionists, were like, we want people to be free, but we're not sure about equality. And so the depth and the level at which subversion and addressing white supremacy in our faith and colonialism as threads in our faith, I think that's a pretty big fissure. And there's a lot of actually very, very good work being done. I went to a yearly meeting session this weekend in which white people confessed their complicity with white supremacy. And then Black folks as a cipher responded to those confessions. It was actually pretty powerful. And that's going to be leading to some action. I think also the way and the depth of which reparations is considered a faith commitment is also a piece of that. And that shows up in obviously in political ways as well. And my own interpretation is that our theology calls us to a really, really deep understanding, a very at the root understanding of equality, of equity, and that our lives are intended, as early Friends would say, to help create heaven on earth. And the early abolitionist Benjamin Lay, who was a real prophet and believed that that slavery was connected with all things. He was a vegan. He believed in animal rights. He was thrown out of the Religious Society of Friends 3 times. And he was like, our job is to create heaven on earth as it is experienced as heaven for some, but not for all. And I think that that we have an opportunity as Friends right now to more deeply manifest that vision and to operate in our whole lives, not just over here or on the election day, but in our whole lives from that viewpoint. So those are where I see the disagreements and the political tensions in Quakerism.
Wow. Thank you. I heard many things in what you said, but want to pick up on this notion of disagreement, deep disagreement about history and about which accounts of history will be honored and respected and acted upon, even when those accounts have, dirty laundry in them, right? So, and that's certainly, we see that in the Quaker tradition, and we see that in the kind of national discourse. What of American history should be taught in schools, for example? And how do we teach the parts of our history that we are not proud of, right? So thank you so much for that. Ashek, what are you seeing? And it personally, but also in your work, because you're engaging many different kinds of faith communities in your work.
Yeah, I think definitely some of the things that we've heard echoed. I've seen those. Differences across social, cultural, and I would say ethical issues. So different people are grappling with how they go about their day, like what kind of ethical choices to make. And you can see different families making different choices about what makes sense, what is okay purchases, what is dipping into materialism. Everybody has sort of a different scale for that. And when those scales are very different from each other, you can have conflict. Somebody said, how can you not see that as being overboard? Or how can you not see this as my right to spend something that I earned? And different people seeing that bounty as a gift, as a blessing, or that bounty that they've earned as a test of how they share it. And there's different theological ways to look at the same gift. I also see families and young people wrestling with, the rapidly changing social context, terminology, and older generations and younger generations having different views on what is allowable to change and what is the point where change is not allowed. Some things are divinely bestowed and revealed, and then there's some movement for interpretation around them. But those disagreements are things I see come up. So sort of what is divine wisdom and what is derived wisdom, maybe. So what is allowable for human beings to opine on. And that also lends into what is a more textual understanding of your tradition and maybe a holistic understanding of the text, right? So you could read text verse by verse and derive something, or you could read the text and get a gist of what is the general meaning and then saying, oh, this is how I'm going to live my life by the general meaning. And then there's disagreements between family. And I've seen it between family members, like in an extended family, one person is very observant, one person is culturally observant, one person is strictly observant, and those things, and they all hold the same identity, but they are sharing it in different ways. And sometimes that brings up challenges of conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Ashek. I'm thinking about what you just said around how identity umbrellas don't really work. I mean, for the kinds of storms, right, that we find ourselves in, right, that for me personally, to call myself a Christian, you know, I was just having a conversation 2 days ago with a colleague who was saying, you feel like you got to give all these qualifiers to say what kind of Christian you are, right? And perhaps the point is that the shortcut shouldn't have been there, right? That Christian shouldn't have been a shortcut. That curiosity should prompt you to ask me more questions about what that means for me, right? Speaking of which, Lucy, you started to do some of this in your answer to the first question. How can our faith traditions be a resource to us as we deal with disagreement? What do you take from your faith tradition as a tool or a solution or a resource to help you navigate difference? And are there examples of difference in some of these sacred texts that we're talking about, right? Like conflict isn't a new phenomenon. I assume that whenever there are humans, there is conflict. So what can our faith traditions teach us? I'll go to you, Aziz.
So I just because I'm a lover of interfaith, I find beauty in all faith traditions, and with us Muslims having accepted, affirmed, and confirmed the scriptures of the past of the Judeo-Christian tradition, our library is much richer than everybody else's. What I will pick from my own faith tradition of Islam, if there were maybe one or two injunctions that really stand out, I would say the call to justice and accountability really helps me understand my faith so well, and also keeps me very honest on how, even if I don't mean it, have I been unjust to somebody? Have I been unjust to the one who is less privileged to me? And there's this beautiful verse in the Holy Quran, if you don't mind me quoting a small verse. It's in chapter 4, verse 135. It says, stand up firmly, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, stand up firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin, whether it be against the rich or the poor. Meaning justice has to be above everything, including yourself. So when you get to that, when you affirm, when you really carry this responsibility of being a justice warrior in this world, it is impossible for you to side with anyone that is unjust. There is a very famous tradition of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who told the Muslim community to support your brother, whether he's an oppressor or oppressed. And the followers said, well, we understand if our brother is oppressed, we would definitely help him. But how do we help our brother who is the oppressor? And it says, you hold him by his hand and walk him away from the path of oppression. That is how you help him. And so there is this responsibility that we're given. I will end with a very short parable that in our tradition we know, but I haven't seen it in other traditions. But it's concerning our wonderful ancestor prophet Abraham, peace be upon him. And the way this story goes is that the prophet had gone into the temple and destroyed all the idols. And the idolaters captured him, and they were about to set him on fire. And the fire is burning, and it's fairly close to the holy prophet. And everybody's watching, including all the people and all the animals. And a little frog decides that I cannot watch injustice and do nothing. So it starts darting to a little pool of water, takes a mouthful, deposits at the feet of the prophet. And the other animals are laughing at the frog and says, what difference are you going to make with your little spurts of water? And he goes, in the grand scheme of things, maybe not a whole lot. But on the day of judgment, when my Lord will question me, when you saw injustice, what did you do? I'll say I did the best I could, and I'll be standing there with dignity, right? So I think that summarizes our responsibility, not only to be our own guardians, but to be out there for a brother elsewhere across faith communities. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Aziz. Thanks. Lucy, do you want to say more about Quaker tradition and what it has to teach us about how to navigate conflict?
Sure. So Quaker, the original term for Quakers was Religious Society of Friends of Truth, which and so the idea is that we are together to help each other perceive truth, and we each can only see a piece of it, and we need each other in order to see a deeper truth. And the other thing that comes from that is the idea of continuing revelation. So so that means that the truth is always being revealed. So our books of discipline are called Faith and Practice, and they include our testimonies, which people know peace, the equality testimony, simplicity testimony, which say these are ways that we need to live. And it's not a testimony until you're actually demonstrating that you're living that way. You're not just Quakers do not profess faith. They live it. They try to live it. And so these books are guidance for the faith. And every yearly meeting has their own, and they are continually being revised. So they're always being revised based on continuing revelation. And the basis for all of that, and they have to come before the body and are approved as the most recent discipline. And I think one of the reasons I became a Quaker, because I had a mystical experience that felt like that idea of God within. I felt a sense of, after a period of depression and struggle, I had a sense of a mystical experience of God holding me, but coming from within. But I stayed a Quaker because of Quaker practice. So Quaker process is, lots of people think of it as consensus, but it's actually coming to unity or coming to a sense of the meeting, where people your job is to be faithful to the message that you hold, just as it would be in meeting for worship. So it's meeting for worship with attention to business, and with a perception that we come to truth and deeper understanding together. So the clerk of the meeting, the person who would be called a chair, but is actually, their job is to listen to the spirit moving among the body, as people often will have very big disagreements. It was really powerful to watch this in my meeting as we decided to budget $500,000 to reparations. And people are invited, if they have an issue with what is said and it rises from the spirit, then they're invited to say. So there's a real open invitation for disagreement to be surfaced. There's an understanding that if we pretend like that's not there, then the decisions we make aren't going to be good. And that God may be speaking from the single voice who says, no, this isn't right. The process itself is a way to practice the idea of each of us holding truth, but also to really walk through conflict. It's not always Quakers can be conflict averse, but in the practice itself, when it's really done well, and I've seen it done well. The first experience I had was Iowa Yearly Meeting Conservative, where I became a friend. I was a part of a group that brought a same-sex marriage minute in the early 90s to the body, and watched as people disagreed. And the first year it was brought, it was not approved. And that was very painful for me. I'm queer. It was very painful for me to witness that. But we spent the next year visiting all of the monthly meetings and laboring together about this. And the next year, that same minute, the same-sex marriage minute, was read, and there was a hush on the floor, there was no dissent, and it was approved. And it was like I felt like all of these people that were part of my faith community had my back as a queer person. And so it's incredibly powerful when you walk through it and walk through the dissent to come to unity and hold a perspective together in a really powerful way.
Wow, I was talking, Ashek and I were talking ahead of this seminar, and I was talking about dissonance as holy. You know, I don't want to listen to music that never has any dissonance, right? I want to hear the minor chords as well as the major chords, right? And there's something generative, I hear you saying, about seeing the disagreement through. Thank you so much for that. Ashek, what would you say in terms of how our faith can be a resource? Oh, go ahead and unmute, Ashek.
Yeah, I think our faiths are a very important resource in that if we're cognizant of one of the core teachings of so many traditions is to, try to tame or hold back the ego and listen to the light, listen to the spirit, that there can be wisdom that can be transformed through us, right? And part of that is to let things go, let things pass. So we know in this story, in the Quran, there's a story of Yusuf, son of Jacob, that at the end of that story, he welcomes back his family, his brothers who betray him in the Quranic story. That's a way of, it's an example. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did the same thing. Like on worldly affairs, people who disagreed with him, he would bring them back into consultation for the next time. Just because we disagreed, I'm not going to put you on the outside committee. Your opinion is still valid. So I think that's an important thing to remember. There's another thing that comes from the tradition called sort of difference of opinion is a mercy, and that we can have different understandings of the same concept or text. And there's a benefit in that maybe for a time and place interpretation A makes sense, and different time and place interpretation B makes sense, and they're both important and valid. And one of the ways this was sort of lived classically by scholars, at least, and we sort of briefly talked about this, like classical scholars would write down their argument. I see argument A on topic, whatever the issue was. And they say, I also saw scholar B said this, scholar C said that, my opinion is this. But then they would conclude with, I think I'm right, I could be wrong, only God knows the truth. So laying out all the possible opinions, not trying to hide other arguments, laying them out, putting your own opinion out there in a humble way, and then reinforcing that humbleness by saying, I'm a fallible, created human being. I'm trying my best, and to be aware of that. And I think other traditions have those types of ideas too. Other traditions have different ways that they have explored those ideas of how to talk about difference and disagreement.
I love that. I love that. There's a kind of, I would say holding loosely one's own view, right? You're holding it. Nobody's telling you to throw it away, but you hold it loosely. So it can be exposed to the air and perhaps change and evolve, but also so that you remember that there are other perspectives, right? There's room for more. I want to push a little bit, and I know that both of our commissioners have a prior schedule, a prior commitment, and so they're going to be leaving us shortly. Maybe this is the last question we'll do all together as a group. I'm going to push and ask, do you think that there's a difference between a harmless dispute and disagreement and harmful disagreement? Or do you think that those two categories exist? And here's why I asked the question. Today, this morning, the Supreme Court of the United States heard oral arguments for another case involving a private business owner who is arguing that on religious grounds, she should be allowed to deny her service, deny her expertise to a same-sex couple. And this isn't the first time the Supreme Court has had such a case before them. Probably won't be the last. But for people sitting in seats like mine, queer folk, who are also people of faith, the idea that I would have to choose between my religious expression and my expression of human sexuality feels violent, feels harmful, right? And so such disagreements can lead to material harm, material consequences that bring harm to vulnerable people, right? And so do you think that there's a distinction between harmless disagreement that can be sort of massaged into community, wholly in community, and then disagreements that are not? I'll start with our commissioners because they've got to go and then ask Ashek. Lucy?
Sure. I mean, I think, if your disagreement is in opposition to somebody else's humanity, that's a problem. Like, it's not like if you're denying another person's humanity when you're disagreeing, I think it's a really, really deep problem. And I think that the longer that like, if you have a positionality of privilege and you deny another person's reality and lived experience and experience of oppression, you are denying the humanity of that person and not listening to them. So I think that there certainly are limits. And in the case that you're talking about, like, and there is like the Supreme Court is going to hear all of these, and has been hearing all of these cases that are going to deny civil and human rights, right? So no, like, you can't deny somebody else their human rights. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing politically in terms of movement. I was talking to a person who's doing reparations and really recently studied the movement toward understanding the United States and to bringing forward of a narrative that slavery was not consistent with who we are as the United States. And that was an activist movement to make that case. And led to the Civil War and actually led to the South saying, no, we think it is. And so we're going to secede. So I think that there's this real, and having clarity about that another person's identity is not something that is for you to determine the validity of that, and people need to name themselves and have self-determination in that. I think that that's where the lines go, and how we deal with the reality of people holding positions like with the insurrection in January 6th that are deeply um, counter and violently opposed to other people's existence, I think really matters. So no, we need to be really clear and have a real clear and operate from a moral sensibility from our faith traditions.
Aziz, feel free.
Yeah. Difference between harmless and harmful disagreement. So I don't see an issue with respectful disagreement and disagreement based on uneven access to power. That's where the problem becomes acute. Those who do not have an even access to power and privilege, and when a disagreement occurs and they go back to their underprivileged position, and if it is between an oppressor and oppressed in whatever sense you can imagine, and the oppressor keeps on oppressing, and the oppressed said, well, we tried to talk, we just disagreed. So is it fair that I keep on getting oppressed and the other party can get away with being the oppressor? I think in a democracy, when a privileged group imposes its interpretation and faith tradition on the others, especially if those communities are unjustly treated in the public space, I think the resistance eventually can lead us to some very unfortunate tangents. The supremacy of all flavors needs to be eliminated and resisted by all of us, we the people. Now, take example of the history of slavery in this country. A full 1/3 of slaves brought over from Africa were Muslims, and they were forcefully snatched. Their religion, their identity, their culture, everything was snatched away from them. And I've looked at a number of history books of our high schools. There is not a mention of this. So yes, those who have the power to write the books will say, well, we disagree. Well, this disagreement really supports your oppression of us. It erases us from history. I think a culture of following respectable dialogue is to be cultivated so we can know each other. There is this beautiful verse in the Holy Quran, chapter 49, verse 13. A lot of Muslims mention this, right? So I'll paraphrase, that we have created you into nations and tribes so you may know each other, so you may learn from each other. The ability to dialogue is the eventually you build up your moral muscle so you can hear the pain points of the other. The other can say, why can't you see that I'm being oppressed? Why can't you see that my faith tradition, when it comes to my religious festivals, does not even merit a mention in the media, yet yours does? How is this a democracy? How is this a fair public spectrum, right? So we the people, when the political and media leaders demonizes some communities and favors others, I think we all need to speak up for each other. We really, really need to say that this is something we say at the Poor People's Campaign, that my brother is hurting and I will not take it anymore. I take it upon myself to be my brother's keeper. I take it as my own civic responsibility to make sure that injustice does not continue forever. We need to detoxify our political and media landscape because they decide who deserves to be canceled and who gets a free pass. And eventually, I think Martin Luther King said that, right? About the arc of justice, about bending. But what happens during the time when it's still on its journey towards that bend? Who's going to answer to those children whose lives are being torn asunder because those with power and privilege impose it? So yes, we can have a disagreement about whether you like, fish and chips or chicken and chips. Yeah, that's inconsequential, right? But when one party says that God gave me the right to do this or that to you, and a democratic nation allows that that anarchy to march on, it is to all our mutual disadvantage. So my answer is that we need to stand up for each other.
Thank you both so much for being with us. I know you have to dip. I'm so delighted to walk alongside these commissioners and our entire commission on faith-based and interfaith affairs. Thank you so much. What I hear you both saying as you leave is that it matters how the problem gets framed, right? Who's doing the framing of the problem? And then it matters the access to power that each party has, right? That all disagreements aren't structured the same, and they're structured according to power. I hear you saying that. Ashak, how would you answer this question about harmful and harmless disagreement? See you, Lucy.
Yeah.
See you, Aziz.
Yeah, I think disagreements are going to happen. I'm going to focus more on the way the disagreement is being actioned. Like, what is the etiquette around the disagreement? How are we questioning each other's positions? And less on, are some things outside of bounds for disagreement? Disagreements exist. If we don't find a way to talk about them, they still exist. We just run in parallel universes and we don't converse. And at least I know from my personal Interfaith Philadelphia's point of view, we want to have conversations across our communities, across these differences. So even if a difference is very deeply held, there are still ways to ask questions and not come to a resolution, but have a little bit better understanding why that neighbor has that position, feels that way, why that uncle and cousin has that different way of looking at this thing. And you still don't agree, but there's a little bit less of a chasm between your hearts, even though there's still a big difference between your positions. So I think I'm less concerned about the disagreement than how we are disagreeing.
I really appreciate that perhaps that's the root of all of the discord that seems to be animating our society, that not only are we disagreeing on many issues that perhaps we weren't disagreeing on before, or we didn't feel like we could publicly disagree on before, but the way we disagree seems so inhumane. I mean, that's why we wanted to bring the word humane back into the topic, the title for tonight's conversation. There's such inhumanity in our disagreement. That's a wonderful segue for me to ask you about some tools that can help us navigate these difficult conversations. What you got?
So there's a couple of things that come to mind that we're always trying to develop programming and create opportunities for. If people want to continue just learning about these things, I think we did a program earlier in the pandemic, and I'll put it in the chat here. This was a face-to-face dialogue event with Rabbi Ackerman and myself. We talked about difference and dialogue on difference through our traditions. So if you want to go more into how our traditions have articulated this in the past. What we're working on more recently is something called Difficult Conversations. There's a series of programs. They're called Civil Conversations, Difficult Conversations. And I'll put that in the chat too for sign up. This is a program that we do monthly. Our next iteration is actually coming up this coming Friday afternoon. And it's different techniques of how to have those conversations of difference. So like I sort of mentioned, I'm a little bit less concerned about the difference and more about what kind of etiquette and what kind of way do we question? You can ask a question in a way that makes it sound like you want a particular answer, or you can ask a question in a certain way that turns off the other person or makes a person defensive. And so there's different ways that we can ask questions. There's different ways that we can listen. We can listen with, listening for facts, listening for feelings, listening for values. So this is one of the exercises we go through. This is something that we've learned from the Compassionate Listening Project. And it helps us truly listen to our conversation mate and not listening to respond. Sometimes we get into the habit where you're not really fully listening. You're already articulating your next argument. And when we're doing that, we're really not listening. We're half listening and really thinking on our own. So these are exercises to try to make us more attentive, full listeners. We also do practices. I think people are now hearing about ideas of calling out, calling in, calling on. These are different ways of interacting with a difference. So somebody says something that jars you, there's different ways to interact with that. You can, say it, confront it. That might make that person defensive, and then maybe you don't actually make any progress. There's different ways to maybe try to hold the light. If we use Quaker language, or in the Muslim world that they have their divine breath, that person who said that thing that bothered you so much has a light within them. And so don't forget that as you disagree with them, they are also a creation of God. They are also a child of God. And you're trying to reconcile, how is this person that I respect, that a neighbor, an uncle, who does good things, but then you're hearing this thing that jars you. Right? So maybe holding up their light, reminding them that you respect them, you love them, you know them, and what you're hearing it just doesn't reconcile. Like, how can the person who does all these wonderful things say this awful thing? Can you help me appreciate that? Can you help me understand that? So these are some of the techniques that we might use. We might do some role play, some scenario play. These aren't, an hour-long session is not going to fix it all, but it'll help give you some techniques, because what happens in that moment is sometimes you're just awestruck. You're like, I don't know what to say to this person. So if we practice a little bit, you might be a little bit less awestruck at that moment, and you might be able to react in a way that's full of beautiful etiquette, and rather than in a way that's reactionary. And then hopefully that will get the conversation going. And again, these conversations, you may not agree with each other, but you will start recognizing the light. And as Naomi, you were mentioning, that these conversations become a little bit less uncivil. And we still have disagreements, but we see the humanity as we disagree.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to put the information back up in a moment so that people can either scan the QR code or click on that link. We'll put it in the chat again, and I'll put it up on the slide so that folks on Facebook can also see that link. I want to open it up to questions. We've got some folks gathered here in the Zoom. What questions do you have for Ashek, who has so much experience in helping people, as you say, internalize these tools, so that when we're not in a conflictual situation, so that when we are in a space of difficulty, navigating a difficult conversation, we can draw on them. I see one question in the Q&A, so we'll just start with this one. If you've got a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat or in the Q&A using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Donald asked this question: are acts of injustice often based in fear? What do you think, Ashek?
Trying to think of it. I think they definitely, it sure feels like they're often based in fear, based in ignorance. And based in sort of the echo chamber effect. I think if we don't get a chance to have those conversations that with people who hold slightly different opinions, we can sort of come to think, I feel, that this opinion is the only opinion that makes sense. Everybody that I know feels this way. Everybody that I know thinks this way. Anybody that doesn't just must be off their rocker, because our world can be so small sometimes. So, but if we have a world where we are at work, on the bus, every once in a while interacting with a neighbor that has a slightly different thing, I think it helps us appreciate not just the difference that we're interacting with, but we just generally have a better feel for, like, I'm always surrounded by little bits of difference. So it's not surprising there should be a bigger difference. And so that should not make me fearful. That should not make me reactionary. And I think, yeah, that's what comes to mind, that those are based in fear and ignorance, but also in a homogeneity that is sometimes unhealthy, too much homogeneity.
I love that a small world
Yeah
can catalyze injustice, right? And I would also say, I mean, going back to this power thing, if I can chime in on this question, I think injustice is grounded in the use of power as dominating power, right? I got power, and the only way to use it is to dominate with it, power over. So, I increasingly, I think that there might be fear operating, but it's so often at the subconscious level, right? It's so often people would not say, well, I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z, and this is why I have the perspective I have. They wouldn't name it as fear. And sometimes trying to name it as fear can be a barrier to continued engagement. Like, I ain't afraid, you know what I'm saying? And so I think we got to be careful around the fear narrative. This is just Reverend Naomi's opinion. Because it may not actually rightly name what's going on. I think some people are motivated by the intent to wield power. We want to feel powerful as human beings. We want to feel like we have some agency over what happens to us and what happens to the people we love, right? And that can motivate us to do some wonderful things and not wonderful things, right? Thank you so much for that question, Don. Anybody else have any questions around how we might navigate this, what feels often like an obstacle course of relationships with folks that we politically disagree with? I'm the teacher that will let silence linger until somebody comes. Yes, I'm that teacher. I'm going to put on the screen again the information about the upcoming Navigating Difficult Conversations. I'm registered for it. I hope that you will join me there this coming Friday. I just wanted to put the link on here so that people who might be reading this and maybe unable to click on the QR code will still be able to. Okay, so let me share my screen. And here we are. Can you all see? Okay, so there's the information. You've got a QR code you can scan to get you to the registration website. And then the link is there, interfaithphiladelphia.org/difficult-conversations, plural, difficult-conversations. And you can register. It's a digital webinar, so you don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home to engage with Ashek and his comrades over at Interfaith Philadelphia this coming Friday, December 9th at 3 p.m. Go ahead and register. To get with some other people who are trying to figure this thing out as well. I see another question. Let me stop sharing my screen. Susan is asking this question. She says, I'm wondering about communication and being able to communicate. Do I have that right, Susan? Contributing to fear. So you tell me whether I'm right on this, Susan. Barriers to communication or lack of communication contributing to the fear. It seems like that gets at what you were saying, Ashek, around the narrowness of our worlds. Like we're just not able to talk to people who have wildly different lived experiences. What do you think?
Yeah, it's becoming more challenging. I don't know if technology moves fast, and our social wiring, I don't think, changes as fast as technology seems to change. And that can be a piece of it too, that we are always engaging online with people who are sort of like-minded. Our lives are busy. There's been lots of studies and things that neighborhoods aren't as tight-knit as they used to be maybe a few decades ago. I remember neighborhoods where people had very different views, had very different professions. Now, neighborhoods seem to be very similar. It's all the same type of folks. And so those are all things where the only interaction you have with somebody that's different is on TV when the media is telling you this is how to think about this other group, this other part of society. And you don't get a chance to actually firsthand see the full humanity of them, right? You only get an aspect that gets highlighted. And that happens over and over again, and we can develop caricatures of each other. And so, yeah, I think conversations are important, and to try to find those communities. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Interfaith Philadelphia, we do these gateway programs where we go to different faith communities every 3 or 4 weeks. People get to meet in person, see how other people worship, and then ask questions afterwards. But we're doing it together, and you get to see what are differences, what are similarities. You get to see how other people are asking questions about a different faith community, and we rekindle that ability to have a conversation. I think that has become, I won't say a lost art, but a diminished art, it seems like.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of Interfaith Philadelphia. For many, many years, I followed the work, and I used to actually be a group leader of one of the youth programs. So Interfaith Philadelphia has got it right. They're saying if we can get to people younger and younger and try to give them some tools so that they can have, as you say, Susan, rich communication across lines of difference, that we can lead with curiosity from a young age, then we grow up into fully adult human beings who can still lead with that same kind of curiosity. So check out Interfaith Philadelphia if you haven't already. Some of their programs you might want to get involved in. If you've got young people in your faith community who want to get involved, Interfaith Philadelphia is the place to do that, I want to one more time throw back up this slide with the information about this Friday's event. This webinar on navigating difficult conversations that will be convened by Interfaith Philadelphia, 3 p.m. on Friday. Go ahead and register now so that you can be in the room. Join me in the room on Friday. We'll go into a lot more detail about some of the tools and practices that Ashek referred to tonight. I want to thank you, Ashek, for coming and giving us a little bit of a preview of the smorgasbord of offerings that Interfaith Philadelphia has. Thank you for your work in helping students and helping adults and everybody in between navigate these places of difference, making difference holy and necessary to our own transformation. I want to give everybody a heads up about a couple of events that are happening. Oh, I see another question. Let me see what this question is. Francis giving us the quote, right? That's gonna drop the mic on tonight. Faith and fear cannot reside within the same household. Well, I think that faith and fear may be able to reside in the same household, but we don't have to let any of it rule us, right? That faith can be here, fear can be here, but we don't have to be imprisoned by either one. And so thank you so much for that. Francis goes on to say, when you see, listen, and respect other human beings, fear will take a back seat, right? Yeah, that fear doesn't have to drive the car. I love it, right? Fear is still in the car because we're human beings, we get afraid, right? But fear doesn't have to be driving the car. Thank you so much, Francis, for that. I think I saw Jovita Hill raise her hand. Jovita, would you like to put in the chat your comment or question? Actually, you know what? I think I can let you talk. Jovita, if you want to talk, I just clicked something that allows you to come on in the room. So if you've got something, you can go ahead and unmute now. Well, maybe not. Okay, maybe that was a mistake. So thank you for being here, Jovita. I'm going to give you a heads up about some of the holiday programming or the December programming that Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs has coming down the pipe. Here's the first one. We, as some of you probably know, annually go to Boathouse Row to celebrate the lighting of Boathouse Row for winter holiday traditions. And this year, there's going to be some construction going on West River Drive. So it's not going to be safe for vehicular traffic. So we're still online, unfortunately, for the Boathouse Row lightings. But again, that means you can keep your Christmas pajamas on, keep your Hanukkah pajamas on, keep your Kwanzaa pajamas on, and tune in from the comfort of your own home. So we encourage you to come on out on Zoom to celebrate Hanukkah on Boathouse Row, Sunday, December 18th. You see the registration link is available for you there. We're also going to celebrate Christmas on Boathouse Row on Christmas Eve, Saturday, December 24th at 4:30 p.m. You can watch that one on the Facebook page for the Mayor's Office of Public Engagement. So instead of coming into the Zoom on Christmas Eve, we're going to be on Facebook Live on Christmas Eve, so you can watch us there. And then you can celebrate Kwanzaa on Boathouse Row. Join the Zoom watch party on Monday, December 26th at 4 p.m. These lightings are the wonderful manifestation of great collaborations with community-based organizations, the Kwanzaa Cooperative and the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. So we are honored to partner with them once again. And then coming up on December 21st, which is the winter solstice, the literal longest night of the year, we want to convene and gather to give each other comfort and hope at the end of another long year. These years just get longer and longer, it seems. We're all holding so much perhaps fear and anger and anxiety and sadness here at the end of the year. Come on out on Wednesday, December 21st. We'll be in West Philly at the Lucian Blackwell Community Center. And we just want to offer you words of encouragement. We want to try to equip each other with what we need to make it through another holiday season and another year. So I invite you to come on out to the Longest Night PHL on Wednesday, December 21st. Let me get back to the chat. I see some things have come in. I don't want to miss anybody's comments here. Oh, wonderful. My colleague Saptarshi Dutt did the thing and put the links into the chat. Thank you so much, Saptarshi, so that you can go ahead and register for our winter holiday gatherings. So please be mindful of those as you go. Again, thank you, Ashek. Thank you, Saptarshi, my colleague in the Mayor's Office of Public Engagement. And thank you all for being here with us tonight. You're not alone in trying to navigate difficult conversations. And it's good to know that the other people are trying to figure it out too. So we're with you. If you need the resource of our office, you can email faithphl@phila.gov, faithphl@phila.gov, and you can email Ashek at Interfaith Philadelphia. I think your email address is af@interfaithphiladelphia.org. And so you can contact Ashek to take advantage of all the resources that Interfaith Philadelphia has to offer. Thank you so much. And I look forward to being in community with you soon. Thanks, Ashek.
Thank you for having me.
All right. This recording will be available to all those who registered, all those who attended. So look out for that over the next few days. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.